Right. So I'd like to talk about the beginner's experience of asking questions about database normalization. So when you first read about this topic in a textbook or in one of the many database design tutorials or on the internet, or you ask ChatGPT or some forum, and you may get an answer that would sometimes be a bit confusing. A lot of material that talks about database normalization is a bit too categorical, and it does not really reflect what's going on in practice. There is a lot of misalignment, and sometimes people would, in practice, would do things that directly contradict what the textbook says. Sometimes even things that are considered correct in the textbook are the opposite of what you see in practice. And there are often very good reasons behind it. Generally, practitioners very often cannot clearly explain to beginners what they are doing. They will say what they think is the right thing to say, and not what they actually do, and people around them do. This is normal. That's totally fine, but you as the beginner may be confused. For example, people will often just tell you straight away that you should normalize your database. That's like the right thing to do, but they won't actually normalize their own database. They will do something entirely different, and maybe they will even do the opposite of normalization. At the same time, of course, they will do a lot of normalization in practice. It seems that sometimes you have to do to somehow do both at the same time. You normalize your database and you also denormalize it at the same time for different reasons. That's okay, and the textbook is correct. And at the same time, practitioners are also correct. They are doing something that really needs to be done. That's fine, but again, you as the beginner, you would be confused here. If you look at most real-world databases, you will see a lot of normalization issues, and those issues happened may have happened for various reasons. So I'd like to record a number of videos, pretty short, like 10 minutes max. I'm going to talk about different aspects of this problem, of this misalignment between the textbook approach and the approaches that you see in practice. So in the video that you're watching right now, I'm going to present a sort of overview, a table of contents of topics that I'm going to cover eventually. I'm going to focus on third normal form, but later we will also talk about some other aspects of relational theory. So first topic is very practical, and it should be useful to people who take some database exams. You can quickly check if the table is in the third normal form by asking very simple formalized questions that have a certain structure. So suppose there is a table of patients, and there is a column that's called date of birth. And you can ask a question that's going to sound very formal. Can I change the date of birth for this patient and only for this patient? If this question makes sense, and the answer is yes, then this particular field is in the third normal form. If this question doesn't make sense, like the answer is no, this question doesn't make sense at all for the business problem that we have, then this is not a third normal form. So if you ask this question for basically every column of your table, you will get your answer. I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a separate video. Second topic, how to reliably design tables that are fully in the third normal form. You can actually design a correct database that is in third normal form. It's going to be guaranteed to be in the third normal form if you use a logical model of a certain structure that is designed to prevent mistakes related to this in this area. This logical model will guide you. It prevents mistakes, and the table design is directly follows from that. Again, we will discuss this model and this approach in a separate video, maybe a bit longer. Topic number 3. If you are looking at a table definition, the database table definition, you, generally speaking, cannot really tell if it's in the third normal form or not. I mean, if all you have is just the table definition, then sometimes you will have to ask more questions about the nature of the data. Basically, you would often use the questions that exactly as I mentioned before. Can I change this attribute for this entity and only for this entity? And that means that if you show your table design to somebody and you ask questions like, did I do my homework correct? They will often not be able to help you because they would have to ask for more details from you, the things that only you know about your problem. And the way to provide those details, the answer to those questions, is to basically write down the logical model that I mentioned previously. And in the end, when you have all of those details in this logical form, you may not even need anybody's advice because you just can generate correct design on your own, or you can confirm that your design is correct. If your logical model reflects the reality, the business domain that you're working in, that you're trying to model, then your table design would be guaranteed to be correct. Topic number 4. What does it really mean to have a table that violates the third normal form? I believe that there are 2 different aspects here. First one is storing data, where to put the information, and the second aspect is how you're going to retrieve this information, how you can query that table. So there is a classic example from Wikipedia about patients, doctors, and doctors' phone numbers. Here again, you have two separate concerns. First is where to put this data, and the second is how you are going to get this data, that number, the phone number, the doctor's phone number for specific patients. Also, we have this entire thing, so-called data anomalies. You have an insert anomaly, update anomaly, and delete anomaly. And those anomalies, they are actually only relevant for the process of storing data. And to prove that, we can go ahead and design the table as an exercise specifically so that it violates the third normal form. And as you try to design that, you will see that actually this design is really awkward. It's just super inconvenient to store the data that way. Like it's impossible. And because of that, you, in my opinion, you will just never design the table that way, I mean for storage, you will just give up really quickly and you will immediately see a much better way. And that way is going to be the third normal form. So I would like to explain this thought process and see how it would be handled. And we'll see that those anomalies are actually much less scary than what the textbooks just lead you to believe. Topic number 5. After we discussed storing data, we can take a look at the other aspect, querying data. And here we'll see that actually for a lot of real-world applications, for querying the data, it sometimes makes a lot of sense to design the table in such a way that it explicitly violates the third normal form. So this statement, like, it seems to directly contradict what I just said, but what we just discussed, but we'll see how it resolves in practice. As a hint, you will have the data stored in both ways, in third normal form and as a denormalized copy. And you often do that for performance reasons. And that's just a completely normal thing to do. People do it all the time in the real databases. And they will simultaneously tell you to normalize, but when the rubber hits the road, they will denormalize and they won't bat an eye at that. And a lot of their tables are going to be denormalized. We'll talk about that in a separate video, number 5. One more thing, something that has been bothering me for some time. A lot of generic advice often sounds like step 1, build your database schema, and step 2, normalize your tables. But this assumes that there is actually something to normalize. Like this, that sounds like you're guaranteed to make your first version of table schemas not normalized, so that then you can apply this advice and normalize it. And this is weird. I'm not even sure where this is coming, but ChatGPT is going to tell you this if you ask the question in a certain way, generic way, basically. So as we discussed, you can actually design a table schema that is normalized by construction. And second, even if you don't really know what you're doing, you can just get lucky sometimes, and you can build a normalized table schema from the beginning. Or maybe you just read the textbook and understood it correctly, so there is nothing actually to normalize. But what's more important is that this advice is not really actionable. I mean, for you as the beginner, like you can post your table schema at some forum, and people will tell you your database is not normalized. You should normalize it. But what does it mean specifically? It's like you post a piece of code, and you hear this code is incorrect, and you should make it correct. Okay, yeah, technically true, but how do you do that? Where are the mistakes? What is the correct form? It's non-obvious sometimes. I think that in a lot of cases where you are in this situation, you're just confused, you're overwhelmed, and you cannot consciously follow that advice. You don't know exactly where you are wrong and why. You just wrote down a schema the best that you could. You were doing your homework, and maybe this is how you understood the material, or you did not really think about the business requirements because you were trying to do two things at the same time, like think about database schema and think about the underlying business, basically, the underlying reality. And for this advice, for this kind of advice to be actionable, they have to specifically tell you where the problem is. And then we're back to square one. Why did you design the schema this way? Again, if you begin with the logical schema and you build the tables based on that, you may not even need this sort of advice. Topic number 7. When people show you examples of data, the tabular data, the reality may be more subtle. Even in the Wikipedia example of doctors, patients, and doctor phone numbers, you can see that. If you just look at the data and you speculate a bit about how that business works and how it may work, you may actually find that this would be a perfectly valid structure of the data. Sometimes the data is actually normalized, even if it doesn't look like that to somebody who, for example, just took a very short time to read your schema, right? Because the schema doesn't contain all the necessary information about the data. And so people sometimes assume, and sometimes they are wrong, just because they don't know the actual situation, the actual reality. And so this approach, this point of view from business requirements side is also quite important to keep in mind. Finally, it's important to point out that relational model is very old. Third normal form was introduced in 1971. That's 53 years ago. And it was introduced because it was intended to fix the problems that existed in the technology of that time. And that technology doesn't exist anymore. A lot of things have changed. A lot of things nowadays just have the relational model as the baseline. And it's really hard to find the design that that violates some normal forms, like, for example, first normal form. And it's still being taught, and I think that it may sometimes or maybe often confuse people because it's not clear what is the opposite of that. How does the database that is not in first normal form looks like? I have no idea, actually. I mean, in practice, not like from algebraic definition. Also, there are some very strong opinions that you can read in the older classical relational model textbooks, or in the textbooks that copied something from older textbooks. Those opinions are very strong, but they just don't need to be so strong nowadays. Nobody really cares about some things anymore. Like things like referential integrity. This concept has mutated so much in practice that it's hard to recognize now. This statement may sound outrageous to some people, but we'll talk about that in a separate video because it makes sense. So here is the idea. I'm going to be posting these videos every couple of weeks, and you can tell me what you think. And if you have any other things that you are confused about, or things that you experience some mixed signals, cognitive dissonance or something, just send me a message and I will try to talk about that and hopefully clarify something. So thank you.